So this right here is the Cube Thinker that I reviewed back in May last year, and I've hung on to it. So often I don't get the chance to do these videos. I'd like to do a lot more. A follow-up video of what tech is like. How did it hold up? Is there any problems? Did it start to fall to bits on me? Is the battery completely dead after a year of use? And financially, I just can't do that. I can't hang on to everything. But the really good stuff that I like personally, of course, I'm going to keep. And this is one of them. So the Thinker is really, now for the price it's been selling for as well, a fantastic laptop still, and I still do recommend it. But a couple of things have arisen and come up at the time of using it for 1 year, and I'll go over that in this video. So it's not going to be a full review or anything like that. This is basically just a recap after 1 year. How is the Cube Thinker i35 holding up?
So if you haven't seen my full review of this model and the follow-up videos that I did in the mod video as well, then I'll quickly go over the specs here. So we've got 8GB of RAM, we've got the Core M3 7Y30, and that has Intel HD 615 graphics, 256GB SSD, and it is a touch screen that it's got on here. Very, very nice screen. So did I run into any problems with Windows here? Well, I actually updated it to the latest updates, and I did. I ran into some problems, so I ended up restoring an old Windows 10 image. Now, I don't know with the new updates if it's still going to run into problems, but I don't recommend just getting it and running all the Windows updates non-stop. I mean, you can do that, but you could run into problems. I haven't bothered with that, so I've set my wireless connection. What I've done is I've now set it to what was basically metered mode, and what it will do is then stop it from just continually downloading Windows updates. And when I do that, I found that I haven't run now into any problems. That's really the only thing that happened. It was going fine for a while, but it was some updates that came through that just affected a few things that bothered me. So that's my reason for doing that. So the performance of the touch is still perfectly fine. It's very smooth, the scrolling. It is a really amazing screen on this, and this is the reason why I keep coming back to this particular notebook. It's just because of the price, the value for money, and this amazing screen it's got. So it is definitely right up there as a top screen. It is fully laminated. The brightness tops out at 510 lux, and images are just so crisp, sharp, and clear. Now, as a side effect to this, obviously the touch screen, using it all the time, you can't see it on camera because I actually used some alcohol wipes and I cleaned up this tablet because, laptop, sorry, I keep calling it a tablet, to make it look a little bit better, more presentable on camera, because I had smudges all over it. So you're going to get fingerprint smudges, and it looks a hell of a mess, really. When you turn off the screen, it's just covered in fingerprints. So that's just a minor con there, but really just amazing colors. The touch response is mentioned. It's very accurate. It's really good. Exactly the same as the Surface Book and the Surface Book 2, the smaller version, of course, screen that they use. They've stuck with the same screen, Microsoft, because it truly is really good. And it's, I feel, probably one of the best touchscreen laptop screens that you will find out there. So an amazing screen, and this is really the key feature to this laptop. Now, the build overall has held up really well, and I have looked after it. I've been using a zero-shot case. These are these Japanese cases. They're quite old now, and I've had this case for probably about 8 years or something, and I put it in this sleeves whenever I transport it around. So that stopped it from getting any real damage, because I've noticed that the alloy they've gone with is not a very hard alloy, so it's very easy to scratch. So if you have, for example, like a ring on your finger, and you're always constantly touching around the keyboard and you're knocking on the alloy, you will get these really fine scratches. That's one thing that has popped up there. The other thing that popped up literally was the screen just on the corner. Now, I've pushed it back, but you can push it right down, and I think the problem was actually me probably pushing the screen down. I was pushing the screen down flat a lot when I was using the Surface Pen on this. I don't have the Surface Pen for it anymore because I just don't use styluses enough, so I ended up selling that. But it popped up on the corner here just a little bit. It raised up about 1 millimeter. I know there's, I think, a few other users on the forum that commented about this. I pushed it back, and for the last 3 months or so, I haven't seen it pop back again, so it seems to be fine. I do get a lot of questions about the keyboard and the touchpad, because some people, they're about, I think only 2 users or so, they said they had problems with the keyboard. Now, it's not an amazing keyboard. In the review, I think I mentioned that. I said it's a good keyboard, but I didn't go as far as to say it is excellent, the best keyboard I have used. No. So it does have now the typical little bit of wear that you would see typing on these keyboards all the time. It's hard to see on camera, but the keys around the spacebar here has some shininess to it. The touchpad as well has got a little bit of a shine now to the paint job, and a tiny little, like a little chip maybe on the fingerprint reader, the sensor. This is still working perfectly fine, the Elan touchpad. back on the original Windows 10 image, that is. I don't know on the latest updates, I don't know, because I just don't run that anymore on there. But the keyboard is holding up well, apart from I have noticed that lately, probably in the last 3 months, it's super minor, that the space bar will not register every single time. Like I get the occasional missed keystroke, which is a little bit annoying, and it seems to always be either the space, if I don't hit it right in the middle, or the C key. And this is only happening about once every 20 key presses or something like that. So it's minor, and it is there, and it will cause the occasional typo. So after 1 year of use, I rate the keyboard as being average. It's good, and especially for the price it's now selling, it's still perfectly fine. So what is a great keyboard? Now to me, a great keyboard turns out to be the Xiaomi. This is the Mi Notebook Pro that I have also had for now, I think, about 10 months, if not more. I probably will have to do a follow-up video of this one. This keyboard has quality keys, and it just typing on it whenever I go back to this keyboard and use this one, it feels so much better, and I almost get no typos in that. They're just quality keys. They have a slight inwards curve to them, so they feel much nicer. Of course, this keyboard as well on the Mi Notebook Pro here is backlit. This keyboard is not. And what about the USB ports? I know after I've used laptops for a couple of years, they loosen up, and that's definitely the case here. So putting in, for example, just my Logitech receiver is very easy to do. It's loosened up a little bit, but it's not getting to the point where I'm going to lose connection or contact. I feel that that's going to easily last 2 or 3 years more. It's perfectly fine, the USB ports on here. It's just your typical, the port does loosen up a little. You can probably see this chamfered edge here that they have. There's a little bit of scuffiness to it, little scratches along there, minor, very minor complaint there, because it's like just polished alloy, and that's why it's really happening. It's going to happen on any device. So the Type-C port, I have been using this a lot because I use this at home, docked up to a monitor, and I use a hub with it, and I've got no issues to report there. I always charge it with Type-C, and it's holding up fine. But most of the time, I do actually run it off power. As it goes for battery life, I'm still getting around about 4 hours, and it really depends on the brightness I'm using. So when I set the brightness to something like 75% at the moment, that's only going to be about 4 hours, but I can squeeze it out to possibly at 0%, which is very dim, but I can still see it fine. That's when you can probably get over 5 hours, or 5.5 hours. So battery life is not amazing. I've never had a Core M3 laptop or tablet that's had really good battery life, so nothing really to report here. It's still holding up well, the cell, and it has been recharged and cycled quite a few times, but most of the time I have actually been using it on power, I will admit. But when I do travel with it and things, of course, is when I do use it. So it says battery wear, there's nothing here, but at one point it did say 5%, I think it was, and I did a full recharge, discharge, and recharge, and that has disappeared here again. So the battery, I feel, is holding up well after 1 year. Now, one thing I must point out that I have the copper heatsink mod on this particular model. So that's one thing I really do highly recommend, is that you do this mod. I've got a video, it's a link in the description for this, and what it does is lower temperatures about 20 degrees. So one area that Cube really did fail was thermals. If you don't do the mod, it will reach, what was it? I think it was 93 degrees in my review, so it does get very, very hot. And I've been permanently running this undervolt as well. So you can see that it is 0.065 volts that I run on both the CPU and the GPU. In fact, I've got it in the BIOS set like this, so I don't even actually have to use Intel's Extreme Tuning utility to undervolt it. Now, doing the undervolt will also lower temperatures and increase the performance, so that's why I recommend you do this. So with this mod, you can just make this laptop so much better. Now, to point out the performance very briefly, that it's running perfectly fine. I haven't noticed any problems apart from what I mentioned with the Windows update, that I can't remember what it was. I think it was the touch or the wireless or something screwed up on it, and I was not happy at all. So that's why I ended up going back to the original Windows 10 image. So I did take a backup of that. So when it comes to Geekbench 4 scores, it normally gets over this. So it's normally about 3,100 is what you can get for single core score performance. And this is a big bump up, even over the latest 2018 Gemini Lake, which is the Apollo Lake successor. Now, you see a lot of those laptops that I often review. They're around 300 US. And if you are lucky enough to get one of these for $380 US, this particular model, it's fantastic value considering you're getting a much better screen, you're getting a better build quality, you have double the performance, and in some cases double the RAM, because the Jumper EasyBook, for example, the X4, that has 4 gigabytes of double data rate 4 RAM, but Here you've got 8, and 8 is plenty, I feel, for Windows 10. It's good. Okay, it depends on what you're doing. Now, I don't do strenuous tasks on this model. I don't edit 4K video because it's just a little too slow with the export times. It can be done, but I don't really recommend it. If you want something that you need to do demanding things on, you'll be better off with a fan-cooled Core i5 laptop for that. So, streaming 4K video, this is fine. It does handle, of course, VP9 HEVC codec files. So all your 4K clips out there will run fine. Even though the screen is not a 4K screen, it's still a high resolution screen. So when you look at any 4K content, it just looks so much better than looking at, for example, 1080p. But of course, you're going to get the borders because this is 3:2 aspect ratio and not your typical 16:9. Now, the speakers is definitely one area where this laptop fails like most Chinese laptops. Although, I will give you a sample. It is better than most of the cheaper Chinese laptops I have reviewed, but when you hear the sample, it's not amazing. And I'll compare it to, of course, my Mi Notebook Pro here, which has got some AKG tune speakers. And these speakers are really impressive on the Mi Notebook. So I'm sure you can hear from that the Mi Notebook Pro, of course, absolutely just blows away the Cube Thinker in terms of audio quality. That one has impressive sound for a thin and relatively light 15-inch laptop. At least the 3.5mm headphone jack on the Cube Thinker, that produces good quality. There's no annoying static or anything over it as well. Another minor annoyance with the Thinker after the year of using it is the fact that it does not have a micro SD card slot. So I always have to carry around this here, my micro SD card or SD card adapter, to get my videos off and onto here. I need to upload something. So that's just a minor complaint there. You're going to need that adapter. I really wish that Cube, if they're going to make a second model of this, they need to make that hinge 360 degrees. So you can flip it right around and use it as a tablet. But they definitely need at least a micro SD card slot on it.
Alright, so after the year, I think that the Thinker is holding up very fine. Remember that I have taken really good care of this as well. I've been putting it in a case all the time. I like to look after my tech. So if you're someone that's a bit rough with it, then your results are probably going to vary. Your mileage will vary with the unit. Now, I didn't mention the hinge, but the hinge is actually perfectly fine. It still feels quite stiff. It's loosened up, I feel, a tiny little bit, but hardly anything, like 10% from what it originally was. So that's not actually too bad. Now the glasses I mentioned did pop out a little bit at the bottom. It came up about 1 millimeter or 2, and I've pushed it back and it seems to be fine. I don't see that as being a problem. Probably the biggest thing for me is the keyboard. So the keyboard has, now and then, it has a missed keystroke, and it happened. You're writing a paragraph and maybe the space won't register for me, and sometimes the C key. But if I type a little bit harder with the keys, then I probably won't even have that problem at all. It's very minor, but it shouldn't really be happening. I mean, after 1 year, yeah, so that's probably where the quality is showing a little bit as the keyboard. Now, battery life is still holding up, even though it's still disappointing. It's still very close to the original figures, perhaps down maybe only by about 10% or something. So I can still squeeze about 4.5 to 5.5 hours out of this, which I feel is decent because no other Core M3 for me has been able to get good battery life. Even the Microsoft Surface Pro 4, when I had that, the Core M3 model with the 6Y10 in it, 6Y30, sorry, I couldn't get more than about 5.5 hours anyway. So no Core M's have good battery life for me, at least in my experience. So the sound, nothing's changed there, of course. The sound is still very average. It does the job, it's going to be good, but not like the kind of sound that you can get out of a proper bigger laptop. Now, I didn't really mention the portability, did I? It's a lot smaller, you can see. Obviously 15.6 inches versus 13.5 makes this machine a little bit more portable. The weight difference as well, that's 2 kilos, and this weighs, sorry, off the top of my head here, I think it's 1.4 or 1.5 kilos. So it's not bad for what it is, and it is really well put together. It's solid. And we've got a little bit of shininess now on the trackpad. The touchpad is still working exactly the same. The fingerprint reader as well. The keys have some shine to them. Is really the only signs that this has a year. And of course, I did clean it. So when you don't clean it, the screen is just covered with fingerprints and grease and everything. It looks an absolute mess, like any tech out there. So overall, especially now for the price that I have seen this sell for, which is crazy, $380 US on some certain clearance sales on certain websites. If you hunt around and find this before it completely runs out of stock everywhere, because the AllDoCube, they don't make this anymore. So if you want one, you have to really act pretty quick to find one, or get a relatively new one or a used one that hasn't got any issues with the keyboard or anything like that. But overall, an absolute fantastic laptop, and I don't see myself selling it anytime soon. Even if the specs are going to be outdated, it's still got the 8 gigabytes of RAM, 256 gigabytes of storage, and the performance is reasonable, good for light to medium tasks. And that screen I feel is going to hold up in another 3 years' time. It's still going to look like an amazing screen. Thanks a lot for watching this follow-up after 1 year with the AllDoCube Thinker i35. I may do the same kind of video after a year with this one right here, which of course is that Mi Notebook Pro, the 15.6-inch model, which is also highly recommended. And one last thing, if you do own one of these, or you're thinking about getting one, make sure, if you haven't done the thermal mod for this, you have to really do it, I feel, to get the most out of this, is add a copper shim, open it up, and put a thermal pad on the back, and it really opens up the performance as well for this particular model. Thank you so much for watching. Hope to catch you in my next upcoming video. Bye for now.